Welcome. Over the next few weeks, all of you have been tasked with sharing stories about where God has met people in the Bible in untamed places. Let the chaos and campfire confessions begin as we meet God in the great outdoors. This is Into the Wild.
Have you ever thought about how much time you've spent just waiting in your life? From traffic during your commute to the checkout line in the grocery store or the parent pickup line for your kid, or maybe even though we just started, you're like, man, when is he going to stop talking? I got burgers to grill, fish to catch. Hey, it's cool. It's all good. Waiting really is just a part of everyday life. I can think of some more monumental occasions, though, that involve waiting for me personally. Like the 2.5 hours my family and I spent in DMV when I was 15 so I could get my learners. Maybe you've been there recently. Or the 30 seconds that felt like forever that took my wife to get down the aisle on our wedding day. Or the last month of her pregnancies with our daughters where I just couldn't wait to meet them. Granted, those things, they all had something exciting at the end that I was looking forward to. And that's just not true of everything that we wait for. Sometimes we're waiting for something that we're dreading, like test results, or loss, or a consequence for something that we've done, or a painful conversation. But the point remains that whether it's something exciting, or something that's excruciating, or just part of our normal routine, we all wait at some point. But sometimes what we're waiting for, it's not something so specific or something tangible that we can really name. Sometimes our waiting is more of a season of life, where it feels like we're not sure how we got there. We don't know what direction we should go, and we don't know what's coming next. And amidst all of those questions, sometimes we can feel lost and just kind of like we're wandering. And in our wandering, sometimes we struggle to see where God is, and we struggle to trust Him, and to remember that the only way that we can truly find our way again and to find fulfillment on the other side of the waiting is through God. And that's probably something that all of us can relate to today. But it is definitely something that God's people, the Israelites, could relate to thousands of years ago. Because that's the kind of waiting and the kind of wandering that they experienced as they were being led through the wilderness by Moses after God had freed them from slavery in Egypt. They had and they were definitely going to experience some amazing things during their adventure, particularly in relation to God showing up for them. But that didn't mean that their journey wasn't difficult or that it didn't feel like they were in the midst of some excruciating, faith-testing waiting. And that kind of waiting can be described like this: a season of prolonged uncertainty that causes us to lose confidence in God. This kind of waiting proved dangerous for the Israelites, and it can be dangerous for us because a lack of confidence in God often leads to us wandering away from Him. And that might be because we're angry and we're just tired. Or maybe we forget all the things that He's already done for us, so we have a hard time trusting that He'll deliver in the future. Or maybe we think that we can make something better for ourselves than whatever God has promised. Whatever it is, we can end up making decisions that pull us further and further away from God's presence until we're left feeling like He's the one who abandoned us. And then we really feel hopeless and we don't know where to turn, and we start wondering, is this really all that life has to offer? But it doesn't have to be that way. We can remain confident in God, even in the waiting, so that we can avoid the wandering away from His presence, so that we can experience the full life He has in mind for us. And that is what we're going to cover in our last week of Into the Wild today. We're going to start by picking up with the Israelites soon after God had delivered them from the oppressive and the hopeless circumstances they were facing in Egypt. God was hoping to lead His people to something better, but it was going to take some time and some effort. And at first, I'm sure the Israelites were on board with that idea. Time and effort, that's okay. We're excited about what's to come because it's got to be better than where we came from. But as the journey stretches on, and the circumstances they're facing become more difficult, they stopped being so excited about it. And their impatience and fear turned into anger. So they began to push back against their leader and the God that he served. So they said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us all out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." And later on, as their frustration continues, they start to feel that their needs aren't being met. And they say this: "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." These are just two examples, these passages are, of a consistent rhetoric of the Israelites throughout their time in the wilderness. And that kind of attitude, it all culminates with a crippling betrayal. Moses, he leaves the people in camp to spend a few weeks on a mountaintop so he could commune with God and get direction for what comes next. But the Israelites, they grew ever more restless in their waiting. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron, who was another leader, and they said, "Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." This is a pivotal moment for God's people, because what they're really saying is, we don't know where God is, and we don't know what God is doing, and we're tired of waiting on God. But what they failed to see, and what we can't afford to miss, is a critical fact of our lives and a critical fact of following God. Waiting will always come, but wandering is a choice that we make. The waiting will always come, but wandering is a choice. Growing up, my mom had this phrase that she would often use with me, and it always came as part of a conversation that would follow after she made a request that she knew I wouldn't be thrilled about. So an example is this: "Hey, we have some family coming over. Make sure you clean your room. They're coming over for dinner." And so, as like any young man who thinks he's smarter than he actually is, I would respond like this: "That's weird. I didn't realize that we were having dinner in my room." And she would just stare back at me, unmoving. And I swear that she was questioning why she ever had a kid in the first place. So finally, I would break the silence and I would say, "But seriously, no one's gonna be in my room. Why do I have to clean it?" And that's when the phrase would come. And she would gently put her hand on my cheek and she would calmly respond while patting my cheek, "You know what? You do what you think is best for you." I still shivers anytime I think about it. Because here's the thing, that was a trap. Okay? I quickly learned that because I didn't really have a choice. I mean, technically I did. I could have left that conversation, never lifted a finger to do what she asked, but the consequences would have been no less than catastrophic. So I always chose what she thought was best because I knew in the end, that's what was best for me. In theory, that's how all of us should and how many of us do feel about our relationship with God. We want to choose what he thinks is best because we know that that's what's best for us. But trusting God and recognizing what steps to take gets harder and harder the longer we feel like we're waiting for him to show up. So we start to make choices that we think are best with less and less influence from God, and often the consequence, which is wandering, is catastrophic. So how can we make sure that we don't wander even in our waiting? It really comes down to three major decisions that we need to make. And it starts with this one. You can avoid wandering by choosing to see yourself as God sees you. To see yourself as God sees you. You may not know that God sees you as beautifully and wonderfully made. He knows that you have gifts and talents that make you uniquely capable of something amazing. He knows because he made you and he put those gifts and talents there in the first place, and he put them there so that you would be equipped to partake in the incredible things that he wants to do through you. And those things will help change the lives of others, but also change your life. And that's what makes seeing yourself as God sees you so essential. Because if we fail to see the truth of what God sees in us, then we will never step up to the plate when he calls us to move. And if you invite God to lead you, and you really are trying to follow his path for your life, he will call you to move for his purpose. And if you're unwilling to go because of how you feel about yourself or how you think God feels about you, that work is still going to get done because God is God. But you're going to miss out and simply continue to wander. The reason that it's so easy for us to not make this pivotal choice is because, as Scripture says, God's ways are not our ways. So we just don't understand the kind of grace and the love that's possible for God. So instead of giving into it, we just brush it off. Because it's hard for us to wrap our heads around that kind of love. But it is not hard for us to wrap our heads around the way that we have failed, the ways we know that we fall short. It is not hard for us to see all the ways that we're screwed up and broken. And we attach all of that and the negative things that people have said about us, the things that live in our hearts and minds, we attach that to who we are at our core, believing that our brokenness not only precludes us from the love of God, but it stops us from being valuable in any way. We can actually see this happen in a practical sense in those first two passages that we read earlier. The Israelites, they referenced their time in Egypt, saying they were better off as slaves than they were following God. And part of that sentiment was born from the fact that slavery was all they knew. Because by the time Moses is called to free the Israelites from Egypt, generation after generation had been born into and died in slavery. Every story they had been told by a grandparent or a great-grandparent, every memory they've ever had, every instance of their lives and their people's lives coincided with a life in chains. So that is how they defined themselves. And they had no idea what it meant to identify as anything different than chained in slavery. And that can happen to us too. It becomes so easy for us to just chain ourselves, whether it's mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, to the things that we hate the most about ourselves. We become slaves to the things that we've done that we're most ashamed of. And we become chained to the words that the people around us have weaponized in our direction until ultimately it all becomes too easy for us to look at our brokenness and say, if they see it, if I see it, then I know that God definitely sees it. And he doesn't want anything to do with me because that brokenness, that defines who I am. But that is not how God sees you. This is how God sees you. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus, our Lord. When somebody asks me what my favorite Bible verse is or the verse that's impacted me the most, I always paraphrase these words from Paul. Because this is what I have to tell myself. This is what God speaks into my soul when all I can think about is the brokenness in me. He tells me nothing will separate you from my love. And that's true for each and every one of you. You don't have to be a slave to perceived insignificance or overwhelming brokenness. You don't have to wonder if God sees you as worthy or not. You don't have to wander away from him because you're scared of getting too close and revealing all of the cracks that you know are there. Because God looks at you, even the parts you're ashamed of, and he sees a child that he gave his one and only son to save, and he sees a person of infinite value, and he has a purpose for you. And that's the next choice that we have to make. We avoid wandering by choosing to live out God's purpose for us. When God freed the Israelites from slavery, he didn't just do it because he's faithful and they needed him. He also had a vision for them of growth and world-changing dedication to their relationship with him. The idea was that as they followed God more closely, they would experience abundant, full life, the one that God had always intended for them. And everyone around them would learn how amazing God is because of what he was doing through them. And God still has that same vision, and he still has that same purpose, but now it includes you and me. And that vision has evolved a bit, but at its core, it's been remarkably consistent, and it's best described by Jesus himself after his resurrection. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Especially in our waiting, we have to actively choose to live out this central purpose for our lives. Because uncertainty, a faltering confidence in ourselves and God, and a life of constant wandering, it makes us become incredibly inward focused. And we start to spend all of our time thinking about the fact that we don't know where we're going, we don't know what we're preparing for, and we don't even know who we are. So we just start searching and searching for something that we can grab onto, and everything and everyone around us, it just becomes a blur, including Jesus himself, even if we've been following him for a long time. And what that means is that we've forgotten that living in the presence of Jesus is not something that we do. The presence of Jesus is who we are. Surely he is with us always. Choosing to live out our purpose means that we don't look inward to find ourselves. We look inward only to find Jesus in us and then let him transform us from the inside out. Because true transformation through Jesus becomes evidence so compelling that people can't help but want to be disciples. I can tell you that I have felt many times in my life, including in my pastoral career, that I was drifting and struggling to connect with God. In other words, I was wandering. And every time I've realized that it was because I was moving with my head down. I'd become focused inward, and I had started relying on myself. And it wasn't until I took a step back and I asked God to move in and to reorient my heart and my mind that I saw that even though I was doing my absolute best with a good heart, I was always going to fall short of what God had in mind, because God's ways are better than our ways. And the only reason that I wasn't experiencing his goodness to the fullest was because I was choosing not to. I just hadn't recognized it yet. Sometimes God is trying to do something in your life and is inviting you into something that you just aren't able to see yet because you're not ready. Not because you aren't holy enough, not because he doesn't believe in you, not because he doesn't want to use you, but because you haven't opened your heart in full obedience and you're still hanging on to control of something and hanging on to the idea that you can build a better life for yourself than what God has in mind for you. The bottom line is, you can be confident in your purpose, because even in the waiting, you have been called to help others see and understand the glory of God. And that might even mean that waiting is a step towards your purpose. Because there's something that God is hoping to show you, and he is waiting for you to recognize it. And when you do, you'll be flooded with his presence, and you won't be able to help but be confident in and attest to his greatness. And we need to cling to that, because our final choice to avoid wandering is to remember God's greatness. Avoid wandering by choosing to remember God's greatness. A few years ago, I read a story about a French scientist in the 1960s who took part in what most of us would consider to be some pretty insane experiments. His name was Michel Siffre, and he repeatedly traveled over half a mile below the surface into a cave in Texas. You can see him right here. This is his tent and some of his equipment. It's a little blurry because the picture is old, but he didn't go down for a quick trip down and back, but he would stay for up to 6 consecutive months without ever leaving this place right here. And he would do the entire thing by himself. His only connection to the surface was a radio that he would use for occasional check-ins with his research team up top. And this team had 2 goals. The first was to better understand how the human body perceived time without any sunlight, without any calendars or watches. He didn't bring anything with him for that. The second goal was to see how a person's mind would cope with this much subterranean isolation. And what they found was that Sifre was completely incapable of comprehending how much time was passing. His body would adapt to a new schedule and it would remain consistent, but it was completely separate from what we would consider as normal. He also stated in an interview later that not only did he lose his sense of time, but with only shadows and scuttling cave creatures to keep him company, and the sound of trickling water was the only thing cutting through the silence, with all of that, he would just lose his sense of self. He frequently suffered from what he described as acute dementia and amnesia. He would see things that weren't there. He would forget who he was, and occasionally, he would even forget why he was in the cave in the first place. And that loss of sense of self, I think, happens to us in the waiting. If we spend enough time there feeling alone and forgotten and lost, it just becomes our new normal. And we can't conceive of any reality that isn't waiting or wandering, and we don't know when or if it will ever end. We start to see ourselves in our lives as something they're not, and nothing suffers as much from our distorted reality as our confidence in God's greatness. We start to forget what he's done. We forget what he's promised to do. We forget what it feels like to live in the presence of God. We forget that his love is stronger than any hardship. And we forget that our God is bigger than any circumstance and that there's something better to come if we just choose to follow him. I think that's what happened to the Israelites during their time in the wilderness when they started wandering. But as we said at the beginning, it didn't have to be that way. There's one major part of their story that's always stuck out to me that we haven't talked about yet. It comes right after they're led out of Egypt. The Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, it did not depart from before the people. Even though they don't seem to recognize it, God never departs from his people. And I can't help but think how their lives and maybe even history would have been different if they had never lost confidence in God. Because he was doing incredible things. We know that from stories that they tell us. And he was right there the whole time, hoping to guide them, just hoping that they would cling to him. But they chose a different path. And make no mistake that same choice, it stands before us today. The waiting will always come, but we get to choose whether or not we will wander by choosing to see ourselves as God sees us, to live out his purpose for us, and to remember God's greatness. We can make these choices. A few years ago, something happened that just changed my entire life forever. Our church had rallied around this movement that we called MORE. If you've been around for a while, you might remember it. And as part of the launch for that initiative, we planned a particular Sunday where we were going to celebrate together and get really excited about what God was going to do. And I was drumming in the band that day, and I will always remember this moment. During the closing song of our third service at Powhatan, I heard God say to me, this only happened to me twice where it's been this clear. He said, "It's time to step into ministry." It happened right in the middle of the song, and as soon as it did, I was completely overwhelmed, and in the middle of drumming, I just started bawling my eyes out. And when the service ended, my wife came on the platform and she hugged me and she asked what was going on because I didn't look great. And I told her what I had heard God say to me. And despite the implications and the huge adjustments that we would be making to pursue that calling together, she looked at me and she said, I always knew that this day was coming, and you need to do this. She knew it was coming, and I did too. I had known for 10 years at that point that God had something different, something better that he wanted for my life, better than what I had built for myself. But up until that day, I had just been painfully mired in the waiting. And in many ways, I had spent so much time wandering. So there are a lot of things that I'm not proud of from that time in my life. But one thing that I'm grateful for is that I always clung to the idea that God was bigger than all of it, that he was working and he was on the move, and that he had not left me, even though sometimes I was leaving him. He was just waiting for me to stop wandering so that he could show me, like he had time and time again, just how great he is. And he wants to do the same for you. Your calling and your direction out of the waiting, it might not be a pastoral career. And we might not be able to see a pillar of cloud by day and a fire by night that's constantly guiding us. But the God who sees you as beautiful and capable, the God who has included you in his plans to change the world, the God who is greater than all things, has more for your life than simply waiting and wandering. But you have to choose to put your faith in him and choose to trust him with your future and everything in between. The words that we were singing in that closing song all those years ago, when God found me and moved me, they were actually a declarative choice. And they said, all of our hope in, all of our trust in, all of our future in the God who never fails. God, how great you are, great things you have done. For everything we've seen, there is more to come. If you have been stuck in the waiting, if you've been wandering and you feel broken and lost, those words can still be true for you, can be a true foundation for you to build on, because God has not departed from before you. Even in the waiting, you can choose not to wander away from the God who never fails, knowing that he's not done and that there's more to come.
God, how great you are, and great things you have done. For everything we've seen, there is more to come. On every victory, every battle won, for everything we've seen, there is more to come. We are confident in all your ways, because we know you never make mistakes. God, you fill us with the greater faith. We believe. Oh, we believe. God, how great you are. Great things you have done. Everything we've seen, there is more to come. Every victory, every all of our trust in, all of our future in the God who never fails. all of our faith in, all of our strength in, all of our future in the God who never fails, all of our hope in, all of our trust in, all of our future in the God who never fails, all of our faith in, all of our strength in, all of our future in the God who never fails, all of our hope in, all of our trust in, all of our future in the God who never fails, all of our faith in, all of our strength in, all of our future in the God who never fails. And God, how great you are, great things you have done. For everything we've seen, there is more to come. Every victory, every battle won, everything we've seen, there is more to come. God, how great you are, great things you have done. For everything we've seen, there is more to come. And every victory, every battle won, for everything we've seen, there is more to come. There is more to come. There's always more to come. The best is yet to come. There is more to come.
The waiting will always come, but that doesn't mean you have to wander. What a powerful and perfect end to this series. Whatever it is you face in your life, whether you've just come through the wilderness or you're about to go through it again, which is probably true for a lot of us, you have got to remember that even if it feels like God doesn't see you or hear you or isn't providing for you, He is. He's working, He's moving. And wherever it is you find yourself, you might have to experience a period of waiting, but it does not mean you have to wander from God. I hope that you will take that lesson with you as you continue on in your life to the rest of today and this week. We really look forward to seeing you again next week as we begin a brand new series. We'll see you then.